Good morning, Kelsey.
Good morning. How are you?
Great. Thanks for being here with us.
Of course. Am I the only one signed
So
up?
far, yeah, so far. No big deal. And where are you from? Where do you work?
I work at Breeze 2 Car Wash. So we have sites in southern Wyoming and northern Colorado. So I recruit for all of those sites.
Yeah. I know I've had breakfast with Wade before and I've talked to him a couple times. So
Oh, gotcha. Yeah,
He
well,
made
that's
me
always an
laugh.
adventure, hanging
Yeah,
out
he
with
made
Wade.
me laugh once when you said, of course I would be in car washes. My name is Wade.
Oh my gosh.
Such an Alabama thing to say, right?
Such an
That is
Alabama.
bad. That's a bad sense of humor.
Yeah.
He's from
Well,
Alabama.
the funniest part is that's not his first name. So
Oh, is that right? That's just a nickname he was given? That's funny.
Wade is his middle name, which is what he goes by, or maybe it's his last name. So he's like Douglas Wade Keith or something like that. Is his full
Oh,
name.
okay, but he goes by
Yeah.
Wade. That's funny.
I
Well,
didn't
he
realize
likes
he made that joke.
Wade. Yeah, he loves it. That's fun to know too. So great.
Yeah.
Well, you guys do sure a lot of things in this workforce space and are a leader to others. So it's great to have you with us today.
We're trying. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So we usually wait just a few minutes to get a few more people, but
Yeah, no problem.
You know, in the midst of 2021 pandemic, I had a community college reach out to me. They had gotten some government money. They were providing free webinars to all the manufacturing companies, all the businesses in their area. And on one of the webinars I did, I was it. They just recorded me. That's
Oh my gosh.
exhausting.
Yes. Yes. I was going to tell you guys that if I'm the only one on here, you can say, hey, let's figure out another time, because to go through your whole spiel just for me I know how exhausting that is.
No, that's okay. If see, I'm an equal opportunity picker honor. I'll just call on you. That's all.
Well, that's fine. I was just planned on driving while I listen to this. So I'll
Perfect.
just pop on and off if I need to.
Yeah, and we actually put it on our website and do send it out to those who registered. So we do want the resource to happen for sure. So
Okay.
and some people, as you know, people just come a little bit later. It's how that goes.
Yes.
So
Yeah, I do group interviews. I understand all the things you're saying right now.
And there's someone else. Yay. So what's the purpose of the group interviews? We have an intern here who's been through quite a few group interviews to start. Sometimes 50 people on a phone call. It's interesting.
Oh, and it's a phone call interview?
Yeah, or like I guess
Okay.
Zoom-ish. Although she was
Okay.
on one and she couldn't see all the people that were speaking. So she was a little in the room. There were 5 that interviewed her and she couldn't see them all. So it was interesting.
Oh man. Yeah. So we do in person, and to answer your question, the point is it's really I think interview is kind of a misleading name for it, and I'm working on kind of rebranding that. But it's more of just checking to see if they hear about our company, they hear about the responsibilities, what a shift would look like, and then our appearance policy. So let's make sure that this is something they really want to do. I don't want them to find that out a week into their job that they don't enjoy it. Right.
So it's like an informational session about the work, right?
Correct. And like, am I watching them, and are they responsible in taking notes, and are they early, and are they engaged? Yes, I watch those things, but there's, I mean, as we just talked about, right, there's so many times when there'll be lots of people that don't show up. And so for this morning, for example, I had 21 people signed up and 8 showed. So if you think about me scheduling those individual people for time slots and then them not showing, that's a big chunk of my day.
Oh, that'd be like 3 days, right? For sure.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why we do it this way. And then there's a pretty good percentage of people that show up for their second interview once they've already, I ask them at the end, I'm like, did anybody hear these things? And you're like, nope, this isn't for me. And some people do, but they usually show up for their second interview after that, and that's on site.
That makes sense. Oh, great. I appreciate knowing that. That's super great. So awesome. I appreciate that. Sally, thanks for joining us. I think we'll get started. So we're glad that you're here from SBDC. So we're lucky today with our Tuesday Talent Series to have Bill Welter with us. His session, Sense and Respond or Become Irrelevant. So changes in industry and society bring both problems and opportunities. Some organizations will thrive and others will become irrelevant. There's a simple but not always easy process to follow that helps you deal with both types of challenges. Our sponsor is Plant Moran, and Plant Moran is among the nation's largest accounting, tax, consulting, and wealth management firms and provides a full line of services to organizations in the following industries: manufacturing and distribution, financial services, service, healthcare, private equity, public sector, real estate, construction, and energy. Plant Moran has a staff of more than 3,300 professionals throughout the United States, with international offices in Shanghai, China, Mumbai, India, Tokyo, Japan, and Monterrey, Mexico. In Colorado, Plant Moran has served its Colorado clients for more than 40 years, with offices in Brookfield, Denver, and Fort Collins. Plant Moran has been recognized by a number of organizations, including Fortune magazine, as one of the country's best places to work. For more information, you can visit them at visitplantmoran.com. So a little bit more about Bill, and then we'll turn it over to Bill. Bill
Hey,
is
Yvonne, no need. I'm going to end up doing a self-introduction on my second slide.
okay. Well, then we'll let that go. That's awesome.
If that works for you, it works for me.
Sure. Do you want me to stop sharing and you just hop right on in then?
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Can you see it? Okay, good. So let me just jump right into this thing and then we'll just kind of take it from there. We've only got 2 people with us. Well, Yvonne, you count as a person too. So I got 3 people with me. So let me just comment on this. That's me. That handsome young man in the back of a CH-46 helicopter was me in 1968 in Vietnam. So I spent 5 years in the Marine Corps, 5 years doing real engineering. Oh my gosh, 25 years doing consulting, and I've been writing and educating for about 20 years. I am officially an OOG, an old guy. And this whole issue of sensing and responding, and the reason I put that picture up of me in the back of a helicopter, that was the first time I had to think about responding. And without going into all kinds of gory details, the issue there is, what do you do when you get caught in an ambush? When you get caught in an ambush, the answer is move. You've got to move, because if you stand still, you're dead. So I'll just leave it at that. Engineering was a variety of mostly manufacturing. Consulting has got 2 versions of it, both from a manufacturing perspective and from a business perspective. And then the author piece is, I fell in love with a quote from Louis Pasteur, oh my gosh, early 2000s or late 1990s, about chance favors a prepared mind. And I used to wonder, what the heck is a prepared mind? Because there were times when I would sit across from somebody while doing consulting and I'd say, you know what? She's got an MBA from Harvard. He's got an MBA from Stanford. They're smarter than me. Why the heck do they need help? And Pasteur's quote kept running in my head about being prepared for the future. So here's the premise behind this little presentation, which, and I'll do a pitch right now. This will be a full-blown multi-week hybrid course sometime later on this year, but here's the pitch. The premise, I have 2 premises. One of them is that creative destruction exists. Now, creative destruction is basically the term that an economist by the name of Joseph Schumpeter used back in the 1940s when he was studying innovation. And basically his pitch is because of change. And I'll comment on that in another second. The second premise is that life cycles are destiny. I wrote a book with a friend of mine back in 2010, I think it was, called Rethink, Reinvent, Reposition. And the whole point behind the book is every company, every career goes through life cycle. We start, we grow, we mature, we decline. And sometimes the life cycles are long, and sometimes they're very, very short, but they're destiny, unless you reinvent yourself somewhere along the mature phase of where you're going. Those are my two premises on this. So the heart of this thing is on creative destruction. The pitch is it's amoral. It's not good. It's not bad. It's there. The punchline is you better keep going at the pace of change or you become irrelevant. And when you think in terms of that whole issue of irrelevancy, let me just give you 4 quick examples. Oh, by the way, face the brutal fact. Okay. Brutal fact. Here we go. 4 quick examples on this thing. The United States was the manufacturing arsenal of democracy after the Second World War. And now we're trying to figure out how the heck are we going to bring manufacturing back into the United States, because we just kept giving it away. I mean, it was stupid of us. I remember during my consulting days at times, I love manufacturing. I mean, I'm a manufacturing rat. I'm comfortable inside of a factory. And I used to argue with some of the people at Ernst & Young at the time, what's going on with manufacturing? And they kept saying, oh, no, it's going to be a service economy. Well, you know what? Baloney. So we can only, I'll make you eggs while you do my taxes. That only works for so long. You got to make stuff. And we weren't for the past 20, 30, almost 40 years now. Second point, Sears was the Amazon of its day. Now, if for young people, and I say Sears, Roebuck and Company, some of them don't have no clue as to what I'm talking about. But I remember in the 1950s, dad needs tires for the car, we go to Sears. Mom needs a new refrigerator, we go to Sears. It's fall and I've got to get some new jeans to go back to school, and I get dragged down to Sears to get put in some tough skin jeans. And at that point, Sears wouldn't even handle Levi's because they were better and bigger than Levi's. So they had their own brand. I mean, they were amazing. There's houses in the Chicago area that were bought out of a Sears catalog. So we're it's amazing. It's there. Motorola was the leader in cell phone handsets for the longest time. And then they got beat up by Nokia, and then Nokia got beat up by Apple. And anyway, again and again. And now if I take it right up to today, Tesla, it wasn't many months ago, maybe about a year ago, Tesla had 71% US market share. And now they're under 50. And the question is, what's the future going to be for them? Life cycles are destiny, creative destruction exists. It's as simple as that. And we could take any one of them. If we went to the creative destruction piece, we could go to Loveland and we could talk in terms of, I wonder what's going to happen to Lightning Motors. Lightning Motors is on a tear right now. So they're growing. Eventually they will mature and hopefully they will continue along that path for quite some time, but there's no guarantees for any of this stuff. So the point is sense and respond, or you become irrelevant. That's my pitch on this one. Let me just jump ahead. And by the way, Kelsey, I know you can't see what I'm doing. So at some point in time, have me explain more if I'm not clear, because I'm reading, I got slides that are up here at this time. So there's a cycle.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. There is a cycle, and here's the backstory on the cycle. Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I used to wonder about this issue of a prepared mind. And I ended up doing a workshop for Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, right outside of Chicago. And I got an email out of the blue from a book agent in Boston that said, gee, Bill, this looks like it's really cool. You ought to write a book on the prepared mind. And if you don't have an agent, I'd like to represent you. If you've ever thought about writing a book, that's like getting hit by lightning. That doesn't happen, but it happened to me. So I wrote a book. But I thought, oh my gosh, I'm just a jamoke who's got a bunch of experience, but I'm not academic. So I teamed up with my friend Jeannie Eggman, who was the professor at Northwestern, and we wrote it together. And we identified 8 skills that are there, and that could be a whole nother topic on the skills of a prepared mind. I'll go off onto a tangent. I've done hundreds of workshops around the world, literally China, South America, just outside of Berlin, I guess it was, in other places. And when I explain the skills, people say, oh, the skills are obvious. And then I say, which ones aren't used? And I'll tell you, globally, the number one skill that's not used is imagination, which is kind of fascinating considering all the emphasis we put on innovation, but we don't reward imagination throughout the workforce. Okay, so coming back. So I drafted the book. I went to a friend of mine who was a hotshot consultant, and I said, hey, Mac, look at this book I'm writing. And he said, yeah, cool, Willie. So what? I said, Mac, it's important. How do you use them? That got me into thinking about the work and the responsibilities of anybody in a management or leadership position. So there's 4 fundamental responsibilities that anybody in a leadership position, and I don't care whether the CEO or they're a team leader, they have to work towards. Sense the signals of tomorrow, make sense of the signals of tomorrow, of your reality, decide on a course of action, and then act on it. And it's a cycle because it runs again and again and again and again. So for some industries, this cycle of sense, make sense, decide, act runs fairly slowly. For other industries, it's spinning. It's amazing what's going on right now. I mean, just think for a second. Chat GPT, if you haven't heard about it, it is like the hottest thing that's going on the internet right now, because it's artificial intelligence that seems like it's pretty damn smart. You ask it a question and it answers the question. And I did this thing not too long ago. I said, give me your comments on strategic thinking. And it came back with 2 paragraphs that were good. They were really good. So right now, anybody in the education world who has kind of had this cycle running really slowly, some college professors got his notes from 1988 and he's still using them. Chat GPT is going to change his world overnight, because if you give an essay question, kids don't have to think about it anymore. They're just going to go out there and they're going to have the AI do it for them. And it's phenomenal. I just went to a webinar yesterday about a guy that's heavy into the educational world. And he said, one of the things that's happening is the market's going to get flooded with mediocre stuff. And his point is, if you're mediocre and you're in the education world, you're screwed. That's kind of the technical term we used. And so anyway, industries evolve. And so, car wash industry, how fast could that be evolving? Well, let's see, car wash industry, if you are in Scottsdale, Arizona, I think you got problems because you don't have water. And pretty soon the water is going to get super expensive. And so, something as seemingly mundane as washing your car is going to go through this life cycles, our destiny routine, and innovation is going to take place. We've got dry cleaning for clothes. I'm wondering what's the new way to wash a car with the minimal amount of water, or something like that. Or Sally, if you're still there, I can't see your picture, but hopefully you're still there. The whole education of business startups. Wow. Everybody, all the smart young people are going to be trying to jump into something new, and it's going to be spinning again. So it's sense, make sense, decide, act. The top 2 are all about intention. The bottom 2 are the ones that are dealing with making it happen. All right. I'm going to go and touch on each of these 4 for each of them a little bit. I'm going to spend more time on the top than I will on the bottom. But along the way, if any of you have any questions, since this is such a small, intimate group, take yourself off mute and just ask away. All right, we're good on this stuff. So, sensing. The metaphor that I use is a radar screen. And it kind of comes from, well, it just comes thinking in terms of jet airplanes and fight, World War II and all that stuff. The stuff in the middle of the radar screen is the stuff that's right on top of you, right here and now. And you have no choice but to react to it. All right. The stuff that's a little bit further out on the radar screen is, we could look at it as, we've got some time. The plane is out there, it's 100 miles away. We've got a little bit of time. Or a trend is out there that's going to impact your business, and you've got a little bit of time. And then further out on the radar screen is what I just referred to as the anticipation zone. So here's the 3 zones of my radar screen. And the anticipation zone is the hardest one because it's only clues. It's fuzzy. We need to connect the proverbial dots. Reaction zone is clear because what we've got to do is we've got to, well, let me just jump to this next one. There we go. We have to react to today's challenges. So right now, there's a whole bunch of companies that are in downstream from the Colorado River that are have to figure out what the heck are we going to do because we're not going to have enough water. And for example, there is a suburb of Scottsdale, Arizona, that last month they cut off water completely to the suburb. It's a small one, but they had always counted on getting water from Scottsdale. And Scottsdale said, we're not going to sell water to you anymore. Got to get your own. And the wells are not pulling up any water. They can't drill deep enough to get water anymore. So there's a small subdivision. They're just in total reaction mode. What else is in reaction mode? Well, the United States government is in reaction mode all the time regarding China and Ukraine and things such as that. We've got to deal with today's problems, or as I put, challenges. The second piece, the adaptation zone, is the trends that are sitting out there. And this is where leaders in an organization need to pay attention to things that are significant and irreversible. And when you think in terms of that, that one is the best story for this one on significant and irreversible goes to the music industry. When, oh my God, 20 some years ago, this kid by the name of Sean Fanning, with the nickname Napster, decided, you know what, we can share music. I can burn onto my hard drive a song and I can share it, a file sharing with my friend on the other side of town. And file sharing and sharing music became a really hot topic for a while. Well, what does the music industry do? The music industry, like, to them, this isn't sharing. This is theft of intellectual property. Come on, kid, you can't do this. You don't own this music. You can't give it to somebody else. So what are they going to do? Well, they decided to sue some kids. Well, what are you going to get from a kid when you sue them? Dirty pair of sneakers, maybe, and smelly socks. I don't know. Somebody at Apple decided we could make money. We could make money if we charged 99 cents for one song and shared that revenue with the music industry. We would have to create contracts with the music industry. We would have to come up with a way to do this thing. And they created something called an iPod. And for those of you who ever had an iPod, it was kind of cool. It was white, had white earbuds. It was really cool, but it was nothing more than an MP3 player. Well, the really cool part of Apple was iTunes. That was the innovation that was sitting out there. Now, so they did this thing. Everybody in the industry said, ain't gonna work. Nobody's gonna spend 99 cents for a song. Until within a week, 4 million people downloaded a song. And all of a sudden, they had a business. On the other side of this story, though, is Sony. Sony was in the computer business. Sony owned a music company. Sony had everything in place that Apple had to put together, and they didn't pay attention to a trend. And so they went from being absolute king of the hill of portable music technology to, right now, the coolest thing is my top dresser drawer, I have a Sony Walkman that I've got a young nephew he likes ancient technology and he wants my Walkman. I'm not going to give it to him yet. I'll wait. Anyway, trends. And then the outer ring of this thing is the anticipation zone. And that's literally looking for clues. We saw this thing big time in the 2007 to 2009 financial crisis. Banks and Lehman Brothers and Shearman and I just went blank on the name. Sure, yeah, right. Two of the big firms went under. AIG almost went under, except they had to accept massive bailouts from the United States government. But there were a few people that literally made billions of dollars by shorting the industry. Because they looked around and these people said, this is stupid. This can't go on forever. They went out of their way to create instruments to short the financial industry. And for those of you who are, shorting basically says, I'm betting the price goes down. And when you bet and the price goes down, you win because you've put money in and people got to pay you what you bet. So anyway, thinking across time. The bottom piece to this thing says, so where do you spend your time? Well, I'll bet you spend your time in the reaction zone. You're sitting here on this, you're sitting here on this webinar. You've got another Zoom call to go on to. You've got emails to answer. You got an appointment that you made 2 weeks ago that you can't even remember why you made the appointment. But you were reacting. You were reacting to events that either you put in place or other people put in place around you. What I do is I tell people, find time to get out of the reaction zone. So here's my quick story. My quick story is, hold on, I gotta have some coffee here. My quick story is, a bunch of years ago, I was doing work for a manufacturing company in the suburb of Chicago. Small manufacturing company, a little metalworking place. And I walked into the owner's office one day and I noticed that on his calendar, he had put out Friday morning to go to the library. And I said, John, what are you going to the library for? He said, I got to think about the future of the business. I said, John, why don't you just close your door? He said, come on, you know this place. If I close my door, somebody's going to open my door to ask me why I closed my door. He said, I got to get out of here. I said, okay, I get it. Why do you schedule it? And he looked at me, he says, if I don't schedule it, I'll never do it. His point was he knew how busy he was. So he made sure to schedule time to think about the future of his business. And he explained to me, he says, this is a family-owned business. The wealth of this business, of my family, depends upon the future of this business. And he said, I can't afford not to think about the future. The man was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, because he scheduled time to think about the future. That's big, big, big recommendation that I've got for you. So the question that I would have for you is, what's on the edge and coming in fast? The workshop that I'm working on got triggered primarily because of COVID. Because, when you think in terms of COVID and the reaction of governments around the world and large corporations around the world, and so many senior executives were like, oh my gosh, we got surprised. Oh my gosh, it came out of the blue. For the 10 years prior to COVID, there had been epidemics around the world. We had SARS, we had MRSA, we had Zika, we had measles, we had other epidemics around the world. And collectively, the leadership of the world said, oh my gosh, germs and viruses will never get on an airplane, so we're safe here. Well, baloney. And it came in fast. If you study the whole issue, I just go off onto my personal, one of my many, I love to get on a soapbox every now and then. We're going to have it again. This is not the only pandemic we will see in our life, and I'm in my mid 70s and I'm expecting to see another one before I check out. because the world has become much more interconnected. So it'll happen again. What's on the edge and coming in fast? Ask whatever it is for your industry. Like I said before, in the education world, ChatGPT came in hyper speed right to the middle, and there's a whole bunch of educators trying to figure out what to do. What you can't do is tell the kids, well, you're not allowed to use ChatGPT. It's like telling them they can't use their phone. Come on, it's not going to happen. Or in the world, at one point in time, in one of the books that Hemingway wrote, the protagonist was in big trouble, and somebody asked him, how did it happen? And he says, well, it happened very slowly and then fast. And that's the same thing that's going to happen right now for Southern California, portions of Arizona. We're not going to stop this thing on water. It's going to have massive impact in the coming, starting this year. It's been happening over 20 years, but it's going to happen right now for an awful lot of businesses and organizations. So anyway, edge and fast. If we were in a workshop, we would spend some time. I would ask you to talk about trends that are going on in your industry, and ask you about weird things that are on the edge of your mental radar screen. And so if you were going to take something out of this workshop I'm doing right now, keep notes about trends that you see and weird things that you see. And that's one of the ways you're going to be able to kind of anticipate the future. All right. So if we jump this thing over and I start talking in terms of thinking. So the making sense piece is fundamentally about critical thinking. In a full-blown workshop, we would spend a lot of time on these 7 things that are sitting out there. But I would always start with questions. So there's questions, there's explanations to the questions, there are alternatives. There's always more than one way to resolve a challenge. There's assumptions that you make, there's people that have got other points of view, and then there's always consequences. I'm going to spend time with 2 of these things. So if we went to the top one, and you'll notice where I said, when it comes to thinking, start anywhere you want, but always start with questions. And the rest of them you can jump around. So from a strategy perspective, this in fact is a summary of a workbook that I put together. And Yvonne, I think I gave you a copy of this workbook. I'm not sure. It's green and all the rest of that stuff. And if Sally here, I just went blank on the name. Hold on, I got to look, and I wrote it down. And Kelsey, should you want to know about this workbook, send me an email and I'll let you know where to get it, or I'll send you one if I got an extra one. 6 fundamental questions, though, that I would start if I was thinking about the future of my business. Where are we? That's obvious. We got to spend some time saying what's our current condition? Where are we going? That's kind of your vision thing that you want to do. You've got to have a sense of where the business is going. Question number 3 is the one the workforce always asks. And oftentimes leadership doesn't do a good job of answering. So my experience with large corporations has been, the senior executives may spend weeks, months, whatever, thinking about where they're trying to take the business. And then they just announce something to the workforce and assume that everybody's going to understand it. And, they don't. You got to spend some time explaining and educating people. Why are we doing this? All right. Because people will say, well, people resist change. My conclusion is that people do not resist change. They hate being changed, which is a big deal. So why are we going there is something that you should spend a significant amount of time on. And then the last 3 questions deal with change. And there's 3 versions of it. It's question 4 is what should we change? Well, what should we change is a nice whiteboard exercise where you do brainstorming and you do mind mapping and you have fun and you have colored pencils and it's pretty and you do mind maps. It's all that stuff. But that's unconstrained thinking. This is kind of like ideal. The second of the three questions of what can we change always deals with resources. Do we have enough money to do this thing? You know, we should buy a robot, but a robot's going to cost us $500,000. No, maybe we can't do that. Or we should really get into this whole issue of big data and analytics. Well, we don't have anybody on our staff that understands big data and analytics. They can barely add. So it's resources. It could be financial resources and it could be intellectual resources. Or it could be, do you have a factory that can even do this thing? The sixth question of what will we change is always a culture question. This is the one that basically says, you know we should do this thing. We know we're capable of doing this thing, but we ain't going to do it. I had an opportunity, a bunch of years ago, doing some work for a manufacturing company in Wisconsin that should have moved their plant to a nearby town that was bigger, had the money to do it, but there's no way in God's green earth that the owner of this facility would move out of his hometown. That was it. You know, he didn't care what the logic was. He just knew that this is where we live, and we're not going to move out of here. Okay, then we got to do the best we can with what we've got. So 6 questions: where are we? Where are we going? Why are we going there? Big one for the workforce. And then the 3 versions of change: what should we change, what can we change, and what will we change? And depending upon the challenge that you've got, oh my gosh, I can come up with questions. We could spend a lot of time on this. I'll go off onto a tangent for a second here. One of the things about artificial intelligence and chat APT and stuff like that, that's kind of interesting, is that it will answer an awful lot of your questions, but it won't ask questions unless you say, hey, chat, give me some questions. Then it'll come up with questions, but it's not sentient. It doesn't know. It is merely a piece of software that is really good at guessing the next word. It's as simple as that it is. But it's also scary because it sounds like it's kind of almost human, but it's not. Okay, so questions are huge. Explanations, that's nothing more than, I'm going to go around here real quickly. Explanations is not, I could put hypotheses on there, but that just sounds like, that's too hoity-toity. Whether you call them explanations or guesses, that's what it is. You're guessing as to what the heck is going on and what you should do. Alternatives, when I do this in a workshop, we always play with 4 alternatives. One alternative is do nothing. Just, let's just kind of keep going the way we're going. One alternative is doing something really safe. We know how to do this thing. If you look in the financial, in the big companies these days, what's a safe alternative for them to do when they're having tough times? Lay off part of the workforce. They know how to do that. They've been doing that for 20 some years. It may not be smart, but it's something that they know how to do. Third alternative is do something wild. My definition of wild is we've never done this before. And for some organizations that, unless they've done it a million times, they don't want to try something new. So I just say it's kind of wild for them. And then the fourth alternative is always one of, let's do something risky. Let's move the plant. Let's shut down a product line and create a new product line. Let's get into a new business. Risky. High upside if you're correct. Massive downside if you're wrong. Okay. The second thing I wanted to talk on today, though, was the piece on assumptions. I refer to assumptions as the high blood pressure of strategy. In a medical sense, high blood pressure is it's a condition without symptoms. You don't know if you have high blood pressure until you walk your arm and then says, oh my gosh, lay down, or you have a heart attack, or you have a stroke. It's referred to a silent killer. So the high blood pressure strategy is assumptions. Just like high blood pressure will kill you before you even know it's wrong, bad assumptions will kill your strategy unless you pay attention to them. And the problem is especially for companies that have, when they start off, they're pretty good at kind of figuring out what their assumptions are going to be. And as time goes by, they don't pay attention to them because assumptions are great shortcuts to thinking. It's like, oh, everybody's assuming this, And so if we're in a workshop, I would tell people, write down 10 assumptions about your business. And they can whip through 6 or 7 of them. And then I watch them have a hard time. I'm not sure what I'm assuming about my business. It's difficult because they're in the back of your head, because they're taken for granted. We don't bring assumptions out and examine them very often. So let me give you a dozen assumptions that I will bet you're making about your business. All right. Well, at least I'll give you the categories. So the categories are, can you see this, by the way? My screen is partially blocked on this because it's got that fancy thing at the top. Okay. Assumptions are at the top. So there's assumptions that you're making about what we refer to as about your business ecosystem. In other words, your industry or society. You don't know it, but you're making assumptions. Oh, the assumption is that, boy, everything is dandy, everything is good. Or the assumption is we're going to go into recession. Or the assumption is they're going to go into recession. We're going to do fine, whatever the case may be. And you make assumptions about your competitors. You're assuming your competitors may jump onto this thing. They may ignore this thing. They may be ahead of you. They may be behind you. But you kind of spend time thinking about your competitors. And therefore, you're making a few assumptions about them. I put these things down as pacing factors. They will set the pace for any industry, for you and your competitors combined, collectively. The next 2 assumptions that you make is you make assumptions about your customers. Our customers are loyal. Well, maybe they were 20 years ago when you evaluated them, but are they still? I still do. Walgreens has been one of my clients for, oh my gosh, 15 years now. And when I first got to get to know the people at Walgreens and we started talking about their customers, one of the questions is like, so do you know your customers? And they say, oh yeah. I said, well, I don't know, do you? Because I know that you know my mother and my mother-in-law because they like the Sunday inserts that are in the Chicago Tribune newspaper, and they could look at all of the sales that are going on this week at Walgreens or at CVS, and they can send me off to go buy what they need, hand lotion for this or shampoo for that or whatever the case may be. But do you know me? I don't pay attention too much to the newspapers anymore. And I'll bet you don't know my sons. And I'll bet you don't know what teenagers want. And then one of the questions that I've asked Walgreens for 15 years now, why would a teenager walk into your store? And that's your future customer, which is kind of fascinating. And, one of the questions, so one of the things that would be kind of interesting, Kelsey, for you is Gen Z has fallen out of love with automobiles. It's been written up quite a bit lately. And the automotive industry is worried about their future because an awful lot of Gen Z says, I don't want to buy a car. I'm going to use Uber, or I'm going to use Lyft, or I'm going to use a scooter, or I'm going to be living in the city and I won't need a car. Well, if Gen Z doesn't need cars don't need to get washed. The future for car washes in big cities is going to be a problem. Not now. This on the radar screen, this is somewhere out between a trend and just interesting information, but it should be on your radar screen. People buying cars because it's not happening, and cars are getting so stinking expensive. There's going to be more problems for that entire industry. Okay, so that's customers on that one. And then offerings, well, offerings are, what do you provide? What do your customers want? What do your competitors provide? What's going on out there? An awful lot of manufacturing companies a number of years ago decided, oh, we better get inside of service industry as well. For a while, General Electric stopped selling jet engines. They leased them and they put in maintenance contracts. So the beginnings for General Electric in the aerospace industry was selling jet engines. They're almost out of that business. They just lease them, and what they do is they guarantee uptime on them. So you buy an engine, you lease an engine, and General Electric will say, and we will guarantee X% uptime for this particular engine. So the offerings change over time. And that's going to be determined by the executives of the organization. And then the next 8 that are sitting out here, and I won't go into details on each one of them, but you're making assumptions about every one of these 8. Do you have the right set of people? Do you have the equipment that you need to do what you're doing? Are your facilities modern, up to date, in the right location? Should we have a facility in Fort Collins, or should we have a facility in Greeley, or should we have a facility, in Cheyenne, Wyoming? I don't know, but that's a decision that you will make, and you're making assumptions about it. Infrastructure technology is all about stuff that you use to run your business. So, when I wrote the first book that I wrote, The Prepared Mind of a Leader, came out, was published by Josie Bass. Hold on a second, I need some coffee. There we go. And so this was 2005 when we were writing it, and so it was now 2006 when it came out. I asked the senior editor at Josie Bass, I said, do I need a website? And she said, well, I'm not sure, maybe not. Well, the next book that came out was, oh my God, you better have a website. And so the infrastructure technology for a writer changed significantly within a couple of years. The piece on rules is basically all about policies and procedures. The piece on metrics is what are the stuff that you measure. Partners, you're making assumptions regarding your partners. The partners could be formal business partners, or they could be something as simple as, do I have the right accounting firm with me? Have I outsourced some of my marketing materials to the right advertising agency, and things such as that. And then the bottom one is resources. This fits again as to, are you making the right decisions regarding the money that you have and the people that you've got in place? So if we were together, I would ask this question and have you name 10. But I would just have you think about this right now. What assumption are you making about your business that will damage you if it's wrong? And this one is an interesting conversation to have. This is the one that basically says, oh boy, this is the one that we better pay attention to, because if we're wrong, we're in trouble, okay? And so you can run off and have some fun with the people in your organization. So you sense and you make sense. And then you come around and you got to make some decisions. And decision-making is, when I commented before about this cycle of sense, make sense, decide, act, and I told you it had to run fast enough. One of the questions that I've asked ever since the book came out, when I work with large organizations, is that, okay, this cycle makes sense. Now tell me which piece of the cycle is slowest for your organization. Large organizations always tell me, oh my God, it takes us forever to take a decision. Because the smart people have got to put it into a PowerPoint presentation. It gets then presented to the middle management. It then gets presented to the senior executives, and then they ponder it for a while. And then decision-making in large organizations slows them down, which is one of the reasons that entrepreneurs oftentimes just sneak in under the radar screen, because the big organizations are just taking way too long to make a decision that collectively the people know they should make, but they've got to wait for it to formally happen. So I'm not going to comment on these pieces here. Learn from others, accept enough risk, and have a clear process. But I do want to talk about risk for just a second. The risk piece, this comes out of the world of project management. And I've run projects or been involved with projects for literally over half a century. And I used to teach project management classes. Somewhere along the line, you got to talk about risk. And then somewhere along the line, a chart like this comes up. And it basically says, what's the likelihood of something happening and what's the consequence of something happening? But let me jump off on a little tangent first. The tangent is too few people truly understand risk. And here's my issue. So right now, I could turn around, since we're right on the verge of it, I could say, what's the risk of 6 inches of snow tomorrow? Well, you know what? There is no risk. It's either going to happen or it's not. The question is, based upon the decisions that I make, what's the risk that I'm taking? So if I decide, you know what, I'm going to jump into my car and tomorrow morning I'm driving up to Cheyenne, and that decision is pretty bad. I mean, could be pretty bad. And this one is really, really, really meaningful to me because in 1980, when I was a consultant, I decided it was important to get to a client's office that was 70 miles away and it was snowing. And after I had the accident, and after I'd been pinned in the car for an hour and a half, and after the surgeon removed my spleen, and after I woke up, the surgeon said, Bill, you were supposed to have died, but your body temperature went way down. Pay attention to the consequences of driving in snow or the consequences of taking an umbrella on a rainy day. So the likelihood of the snow or rain could be anywhere from rare to all the way up to imminent. But the consequences are all about my decisions. You know, if it snows tomorrow and I just sit inside my world headquarters here and drink coffee, I don't care. That's a green across the board, unless I drink too much coffee. But if I decided to, you know, I really want to drive up to Cheyenne, Wyoming tomorrow, I'm smack in the red zone. Okay. The point behind this is the green stuff is usually pretty clear. The red stuff is usually pretty clear. The yellow stuff, and Kelsey, I'm sorry, you can't see my very pretty picture here. The yellow stuff is basically, you know, it could be bad. It might happen. I just say this needs managerial courage. And this one is a cultural issue for an organization. Some organizations, especially startups and things like that, man, they are risk accepting. Big companies, because they've got a lot to lose, they are risk adverse. And so the yellow zone oftentimes turns red on them. So when this thing gets to you, Kelsey, you'll see it. It's a very pretty picture, but you'll kind of understand it. Think in terms of my story of driving in the snow, and it'll come across to you. All right, we got about 7 minutes left and I'm right on time. Okay, sense, make sense, decide, act. The last portion of this thing has got 3 components to it. So you've made all these decisions and you've got intention. This is what we intend to happen. But then you've got to actually execute on it. It has to happen. So the 3 pieces to this one is projects, number 1. Every time you put together a strategy, it ends up as a series of projects. And as I mentioned to you, I've been involved with projects for over half a century. I have never come across an organization that says, oh, our projects are always on time, on budget, and deliver full scope. Nobody ever says that. And I've done, so my extremes are, I've done project education sites, and I've done project education for Victoria's Secrets, where it launches, I don't know, something else. nobody ever brags how good they are. So if I were going to spend, if you only had $10 to spend on training and development, I would spend all $10 on project management skills. You need good project managers because that's where you're going to waste money. That's your costs will get out of control in the project area. The foundation behind this, underneath this all, though, is the capabilities that you have and will need, and the capacity that you have and will need. In the world of technology, there's a whole bunch of capabilities that organizations need that they don't have now. And so, you know, whether it's big data or whether it's artificial intelligence or whether it's robotics or whether it's social media platforms and things like that, they need people who can work this stuff. And we just need to do that. So unfortunately, our education system is not keeping pace with where industries are going. I have great hope for community colleges because they're much more practical. And I think the smaller colleges have got the opportunity to kind of really serve industry at this point in time of giving them a workforce that they need. But there's capability issues there. And then capacity, well, we have just spent the last 20 some years trying to become lean and mean. And some of our organizations have become lean and anorexic. And we don't have the capacity to try to take on new projects. I've got a workshop that I've been doing called Making Strategy Happen. And it's based upon 10 questions. But then question 0 is always, how will we make the time to run this project? Because everybody's already busy. And this was the one where I've had this argument. I had this argument with people at Discover Card, and they basically were, well, just have to make it happen. And I said, well, you know what? I understand that. You're either going to ruin your career or you're going to ruin your family life. Because if you're going to just say, I'm going to take on a new project on top of everything else, something's got to give. And so learn how to delegate, learn how to say no, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, big issue. So sense, make sense, decide, act. That all comes out into 3 skills, capabilities, and capacity. Okay. Here's my pretty chart of this whole thing. This is literally a 2-day workshop that I've done, a 1-day workshop that I've done, and now a 1-hour webinar that I've done. And you'll get this thing because I'm going to send all my slides off to Yvonne, and Yvonne will share my slides with you. But there's the picture of sensing, making sense, deciding, and acting. The thing I didn't talk about is smack dab in the middle is vision, values, and goals. Get clarity on this. You need great clarity on what are the values that are going to drive you, what are your vision, and what are the goals that you're trying to accomplish. And if you don't have clarity, you're going to waste some time. Okay. The issue now is questions now or later. We only have 2 minutes left. But if you, my standard routine is, especially for now that I'm here in Northern Colorado, coffee and conversation. Yvonne will tell you, I drink coffee and I like to talk. So give me a call. I'll be happy to do it. And there's my email address, bill.welter@mindprep.com. I do write a newsletter. So if you went on to mindprep.com, you can click on it and get my newsletter. And it goes out 3 times a month, I think, something like that. Lately, I've been writing it weekly because I'm getting ready to launch a new program. So we got 2 minutes left. Anybody got any questions? I'm going to shut up and drink coffee.
I don't have any questions, but you gave me so much to think about. So I really appreciate this conversation this morning for sure.
Well, we can talk. We could talk more if I put my New Jersey accent on. Let's talk.
Yeah, just want to say thanks, Bill. Some of these were materials that you had presented to our group before, so it was great hearing them again and seeing the visuals and just keeping the things top of mind. So yeah, a lot to think about. Thank you.
Yeah, the whole point behind this, Sally, is that you just got to keep moving at the pace of change, because otherwise you become irrelevant. And I can't think of anything more damning for an organization or for its leadership team than to have people say, we just don't need you anymore. That's just brutal. So, okay. Kelsey, you there?
I am, yes. I think it's going to make a lot more sense when I get those visuals. So I appreciate you sending those on, but just echoing at what everyone else has said, I appreciate the time you took and it's getting my thoughts going and thinking about a lot of different things. So
Okay. And once you get the slides, if you've got questions, just give me a call. Happy to
Awesome.
talk them through with you.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, Yvonne, back in your ballpark.
Yeah, Bill, thank you. I'm trying to share my slides. Am I sharing them? Maybe
No.
not. Oh, all right then. Well, we'll keep going so everyone can get out. It is noon. So thank you again, Bill. Thanks for your time and your wisdom and your wonderful examples. And I really love the 6 questions. I think that's just, I'm going to hang on to those for sure. So to let you know, next week we have another session with Mike Kohler. It's entitled Interviewing and Onboarding That Will Make Them Want to Stay. So that's next Tuesday, the 28th from 11 to 12. Again, you can just register on our website, no charge. Just come and join us. And we're sponsored again by Plant Moran. So thank you all for joining us today, and have a wonderful rest of your day and be safe and warm tomorrow.
Take care.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's go.